The massive alien ship dropped out of hyperspace with a sound like thunder, breaking the silence of space. Captain Vexithai stretched his forearms and smiled with his sharp teeth. His yellow eyes glowed with excitement as he looked at the planet below. "Another easy catch," he said to his crew. The bridge of the Void Harvester was dark and cold, just like the hearts of the creatures who worked there. Vexithai was a Zephyrian, and his people had been hunting and capturing other species for hundreds of years. The planet below looked perfect for their needs. Their sensors showed small settlements with wooden buildings and simple farms. Smoke rose from cooking fires. People moved around doing daily tasks with no sign of advanced technology. The humans here seemed to live like their ancestors did thousands of years ago. "Look at them," laughed Crix, his second in command. "They don't even have metal ships or energy weapons. This will be like taking food from babies." Vexithai nodded and activated the ship's scanning systems. The readings showed exactly what he expected. No defensive systems, no military bases, no communication networks that could call for help. Just simple humans living simple lives on a world far from anywhere important. The Zephyrians had learned long ago that humans were one of the best species to capture and sell. They were strong enough to do hard work, but not smart enough to cause real problems. The primitive ones were even better because they got scared easily and gave up quickly. "Begin the standard hunting protocol," Vexithai ordered. His crew moved to their positions with practiced ease. They had done this many times before. First, they released atmospheric scramblers. These small devices would float down to the planet and send out special signals that would stop any basic machines from working. Not that these humans seemed to have many machines, but it was always better to be safe. Next came the fear inducers. These made loud, scary noises and flashing lights that would make the humans run around in panic. Scared prey was easier to catch than calm prey. Finally, they would send down the capture teams with their nets and sleep weapons. The humans would be unconscious before they knew what hit them. Down on the planet in a small farming village, a woman named Sarah was hanging clothes to dry. She looked up at the sky and saw the alien ship. Her face showed fear and confusion, just like any normal person would feel. "Everyone, get inside," she shouted to the other villagers. "Something's coming!" People began running toward their homes. Children cried. Adults looked up at the sky with terror in their eyes. It looked exactly like what the Zephyrians expected to see. But if someone looked very carefully at Sarah's eyes, they might have noticed something strange. For just a moment, her look of fear was replaced by something else, something cold and calculating. Then the scared expression returned. The atmospheric scramblers began their work. A few simple radios in the village stopped working. Some basic tools powered down. The Zephyrians watched their screens and saw the energy signatures disappear one by one. "Perfect," said Crix. "Their technology is completely disabled. They can't call for help now." The fear inducers came next. Horrible sounds echoed across the village. Bright lights flashed in patterns designed to cause panic. The villagers screamed and ran in all directions. Sarah ran too, but her path seemed random only to those who didn't know what to look for. She moved in a specific pattern, staying close to certain people while avoiding others. When she thought no one was watching, she made small hand signals to some of the other villagers. The capture teams descended in small, fast ships. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that could put humans to sleep instantly. Their nets were made of material stronger than steel but lighter than silk. The first villagers were caught quickly. The nets wrapped around them and they fell unconscious before they could even scream. The Zephyrians worked fast and efficiently. They had done this thousands of times before. Sarah was caught near the village well. The net hit her and she fell down looking terrified and confused. Her body went limp as the sleep weapon took effect. To the aliens, she looked exactly like all the other scared humans they had captured. But just before she lost consciousness, Sarah's fingers moved in a pattern that looked like random twitching. Another captured villager, an older man named Marcus, saw the signal. His own fingers twitched back in response. Within an hour, 12 humans had been captured and loaded onto the alien ship. The Zephyrians were very happy with their work. These humans looked strong and healthy. They would bring good prices at the slave markets. As the Void Harvester prepared to leave, Vexithai looked at his newest prizes on the security monitors. They were locked in holding cells designed for primitive humans. The cells had thick metal bars and energy barriers that could stop anything short of military-grade weapons. The humans were starting to wake up. They looked around with wide, frightened eyes. Some of them cried. Others just sat quietly, staring at the walls. It was exactly what Vextai expected to see. "Set course for Proxima Station," he ordered. "Contact the auction houses and tell them we have fresh human stock. 12 of them, all in good condition." The ship jumped into hyperspace with a flash of blue light. The journey to the slave markets would take several days. During that time, the humans would be processed, cataloged, and prepared for sale. Vextai was already thinking about how much money he would make. Primitive humans were always popular with buyers. They were strong enough for hard work, but too simple to cause trouble. Some buyers liked them because they were easy to train. Others bought them because they enjoyed breaking the spirits of proud species. In the holding cells, the captured humans sat quietly. They looked defeated and hopeless, just like prey should look. The ship's sensors monitored their vital signs and found nothing unusual. Heart rates were elevated, but not dangerously so. Brain activity was normal for stressed humans. What the sensors couldn't detect was the tiny smile that passed between Sarah and Marcus when no cameras were watching. It was quick and small, but it was there. The Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake. They thought they had captured simple farmers and villagers. They thought they had easy prey that would bring them easy money. They had no idea that they had just captured some of the most dangerous humans in the galaxy. They had no idea that their primitive prisoners were actually highly trained operatives on a mission that would change everything. The trap had been set perfectly. The bait had been taken. Now the real hunt would begin. But this time the Zephyrians would be the prey. The Void Harvester flew through hyperspace, carrying its crew toward a fate they could never have imagined. In the holding cells below, 12 humans waited patiently for their moment to strike. The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating humanity. The processing room smelled like chemicals and fear. Sarah Chen stood perfectly still as the Zephyrian medical scanner ran over her body. She kept her face blank and her eyes wide with the kind of terror that simple farmers would feel. The alien doctor, a thin creature with 6 fingers and gray skin, made notes on his electronic tablet. "This female specimen shows excellent physical conditioning," he muttered to his assistant. "Muscle tone is very good for a primitive. Heart and lung function are superior." Sarah wanted to smile at that comment, but she kept her expression scared and confused instead. If only they knew how superior her conditioning really was. She had been trained by the best military instructors in human space. Her body was a weapon that had been sharpened for years. "Perhaps the manual labor on their world has made them stronger," suggested the assistant, a younger Zephyrian with bright green markings on his scales. "Perhaps," agreed the doctor. "Mark her as grade A stock. She will bring a high price." One by one, all 12 humans were processed through the medical examination. The Zephyrians found them all to be in remarkably good health. Their vital signs were steady, their physical condition was excellent, and their psychological profiles showed the kind of simple fear responses expected from primitive people. What the aliens didn't notice were the tiny details that would have alarmed any human military expert. The way Marcus held his shoulders despite trying to look beaten down. The controlled breathing patterns that Lisa used to stay calm. The micro-expressions that David used to communicate with Tom across the room. After processing, the humans were separated into individual holding cells. Each cell was designed to contain beings with basic human strength and intelligence. The bars were strong enough to stop normal humans from breaking out. The electronic locks were simple but effective. The monitoring systems watched everything. Vextai visited the holding area before the ship's sleep cycle began. He liked to look at his merchandise and imagine the profits they would bring. The humans sat in their cells looking defeated and hopeless. Some of them were crying quietly. Others just stared at the walls. "Don't worry, primitives," he said with his sharp-toothed grin. "You will have new homes soon. Good masters who will take care of you as long as you work hard and obey orders." Sarah looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Please," she said in a shaking voice. "Please let us go home. We haven't done anything wrong." Vextai laughed. "Home? Your home is gone now. You belong to me until someone else buys you. Learn that quickly and your life will be easier." After the captain left, the lights in the holding area dimmed to simulate nighttime. The monitoring system switched to low-power mode to save energy during the sleep cycle. This was when most ships ran with skeleton crews and reduced surveillance. Sarah waited exactly 37 minutes after the lights dimmed. Then she moved. Her hands went to a place behind her left ear that looked like a small birthmark. Her fingers pressed in a specific pattern, and the birthmark opened to reveal a tiny compartment. From it, she pulled out a device no bigger than a grain of rice. The device was made of materials that didn't exist on any primitive world. It was a product of humanity's most advanced technology, designed to be completely invisible to standard alien scanners. When activated, it could do things that would terrify the Zephyrians if they knew about it. Sarah attached the device to the electronic lock on her cell door. It began working immediately, learning the lock's security patterns and finding ways around them. While it worked, Sarah made another small hand signal toward Marcus's cell. Marcus had been watching and waiting. When he saw Sarah's signal, his own hands went to work. From a hiding place in his mouth behind what looked like an old filling, he pulled out another tiny device. This one was designed to interfere with the monitoring systems without completely shutting them down. The cameras would still show images, but those images would be false ones created by the device. To anyone watching the screens, the humans would appear to be sleeping peacefully in their cells. In reality, they would be free to move around and work. One by one, the cell doors opened with soft clicking sounds. The humans emerged from their prisons, but they didn't look like the same scared villagers who had been captured. Their postures changed. Their expressions became hard and focused. They moved with the silent precision of trained soldiers. Sarah gathered her team in the center of the holding area. When she spoke, her voice was no longer the frightened whisper of a simple farm woman. It was the calm, controlled voice of someone who had commanded special operations in the most dangerous places in human space. "Listen up," she said quietly. "We have approximately 6 hours before the next security check. Lisa, I want you to map their computer networks. Find out how big this operation really is. David and Tom, you're on ship systems. I want to know everything about their engines, weapons, and navigation. Marcus, you're with me. We're going to plant some listening devices and see what else we can learn about these bastards." The team moved out immediately. Lisa pulled a device from a hidden compartment in her boot that looked like nothing more than a small piece of metal. When activated, it became a quantum computer interface capable of breaking through alien security systems that were supposed to be unbreakable. David and Tom worked together to access the ship's maintenance panels. Their tools looked like simple pieces of jewelry or clothing accessories, but they were actually sophisticated hacking devices. Within minutes, they had tapped into the ship's main computer core. Sarah and Marcus moved through the ship like ghosts. They had studied Zephyrian ship designs for years, memorizing every corridor and every system. They knew exactly where to place their microscopic surveillance devices for maximum effectiveness. The devices they planted were marvels of human engineering. Each one was smaller than a dust particle, but capable of recording video, audio, and electronic data. They were powered by the ship's own electrical systems and virtually impossible to detect without specialized equipment that the Zephyrians didn't even know existed. As they worked, the humans learned things that made their blood run cold. The Zephyrians had been raiding human colonies for over 50 years. Thousands of people had been taken from their homes and sold into slavery. Men, women, and children had all disappeared into the vast network of alien slave markets. But they also learned something that gave them hope. The Zephyrians kept detailed records of their operations. Every raid was documented. Every slave market was mapped. Every buyer was cataloged. It was information that could be used to destroy the entire network. Lisa's computer skills uncovered the locations of 17 major slave-holding facilities. David and Tom found the communication codes that the slavers used to coordinate their raids. Marcus discovered a database containing the locations of over 200 human colonies that had been marked for future attacks. By the time the team returned to their cells, they had gathered enough intelligence to cripple the Zephyrian slave trade forever. But more importantly, they had confirmed what they had suspected. This wasn't just a single ship operation. It was part of a vast criminal empire that stretched across multiple star systems. Sarah made sure everyone was back in their cells before deactivating the false images on the monitors. To the ship's computers, it looked like the humans had never moved at all. They were still sleeping peacefully in their locked cells, exactly where they were supposed to be. But now they knew the truth about their captors. And soon, the entire galaxy would know the truth about humanity. The Void Harvester continued its journey through hyperspace, carrying what its crew thought were primitive slaves toward the auction blocks. They had no idea that their cargo had just turned their own ship into a weapon that would be used against them. The real mission was just beginning. The third day aboard the Void Harvester began like any other, but Captain Vextai was starting to feel uneasy. Small things were going wrong throughout the ship. Nothing major, just tiny problems that made him wonder if his crew was getting lazy. First, the coffee synthesizer in his quarters had produced something that tasted like metal shavings. Then the environmental controls in Sector 7 had gotten stuck, making that area too cold for anyone to work comfortably. Now his communication console was making a strange buzzing sound every few minutes. "Crix," he called to his second-in-command. "Have the maintenance team check all our systems." "Something feels wrong." Crix looked tired and frustrated. "Sir, we've been having problems all over the ship. The navigation computer keeps asking us to confirm our course every hour. The food processors in the crew quarters are working too slowly. Even the lights in the exercise room are flickering." Vexthai's yellow eyes narrowed. "Is it sabotage?" "I don't think so, sir. The problems are too random and too small. It's like the ship is just getting old and worn out all at once." What neither of them knew was that in the holding cells below, Sarah Chen was receiving detailed reports from her team. The random problems were actually carefully planned operations designed to test how the Zephyrians responded to system failures. Lisa had created a virus that moved through the ship's computer network like a ghost, causing tiny glitches that revealed how the alien systems were connected to each other. Every time something went wrong, the ship's computers automatically ran diagnostic programs that her hidden devices could monitor and learn from. David and Tom had been even more clever. They had programmed microscopic changes to the ship's power distribution systems. Nothing dangerous, just tiny fluctuations that forced the engineering crews to check different parts of the ship. Every time a Zephyrian engineer opened a maintenance panel, the hidden human surveillance devices gathered more information about the ship's design. But the intelligence gathering was only part of their mission. Sarah's team was also establishing communication with Earth Command, using technology that the Zephyrians couldn't even imagine. Hidden inside what looked like a simple tooth filling in Marcus's mouth was a quantum entanglement communicator. It was connected to a matching device in the headquarters of Human Special Operations, thousands of light years away. Messages sent through the quantum link arrived instantly, no matter how far the ship traveled. Every night during the sleep cycle, the team transmitted their findings back to Earth: the locations of slave markets, the names of Zephyrian commanders, the routes used by raiding fleets, security codes for alien installations. It was the kind of intelligence that human forces had been trying to gather for decades. Admiral Sarah Hayes sat in her office at Special Operations Command, reading the latest reports from the undercover team. Her face was grim as she studied the scope of the Zephyrian slave trade. Thousands of humans were being held in facilities across 12 different star systems. "Get me the Colonial Defense Force," she ordered her aide. "Tell them we're moving to Phase 2 of Operation Shepherd." Back on the Void Harvester, Sarah Chen was preparing for the most dangerous part of their mission. The ship was only 2 days away from Proxima Station, the largest slave market in this part of the galaxy. Once they arrived, the team would be separated and sold to different buyers. They needed to gather as much information as possible before that happened. Tonight, they would take a much bigger risk. Instead of just accessing computer systems from the holding area, Sarah and Marcus would leave their cells and move through the ship to reach the bridge. They needed to copy the navigation database that contained the locations of every world the Zephyrians had ever raided. The plan required perfect timing. Lisa's virus would create a cascade failure in the ship's internal communication system at exactly 0300 hours. For 17 minutes, the security cameras would show nothing but static, while the computers tried to fix themselves. During those 17 minutes, Sarah and Marcus would have to reach the bridge, copy the navigation data, plant additional surveillance devices, and return to their cells. If they were caught, it would expose the entire operation. At exactly 0300 hours, the ship's communication system began having problems. Screens throughout the Void Harvester flickered with static, internal comm channels filled with electronic noise. The Night Watch crew started running diagnostic programs to find the source of the trouble. Sarah and Marcus moved through the darkened corridors like shadows. They had memorized every turn, every door, every security checkpoint. Marcus carried a device that could temporarily disable electronic locks without leaving any trace of interference. The bridge was empty except for one sleepy Zephyrian who was supposed to be monitoring the ship's course through hyperspace. He was reading something on his personal tablet and paying no attention to his instruments. Sarah attached a data extractor to the navigation console, while Marcus placed microscopic listening devices near the captain's chair and the communication station. The data extractor worked silently, copying millions of files containing 50 years of rating records. Just as they finished their work, the ship lurched slightly. Both humans froze, listening for any sign that something was wrong. The Zephyrian on duty looked up from his tablet and checked his instruments, but everything seemed normal. Probably just a minor hyperspace fluctuation, he muttered, and went back to his reading. Sarah and Marcus made it back to their cells with 3 minutes to spare. As the communication systems came back online, the surveillance cameras resumed their normal monitoring. To anyone watching, the humans had never left their cells, but now they had access to the complete Zephyrian rating database. Every human colony that had been attacked, every slave market that had received human prisoners, every buyer who had purchased human slaves. It was enough information to launch a coordinated strike against the entire network. The data was immediately transmitted to Earth Command through the quantum link. Admiral Hayes studied the intelligence reports with growing anger. The scope of the Zephyrian operations was even larger than they had suspected. "Bastards have been hunting our people like animals," she said to her staff. "Well, it's time they learned what it feels like to be hunted." Orders went out to Colonial Defense Force units throughout human space. Battle fleets began moving toward predetermined positions. Special operations teams prepared for simultaneous strikes on 17 different worlds. The largest military operation in human history was about to begin. On the Void Harvester, Vexthai was still dealing with mysterious system problems. His engineering crews had found no explanation for the random failures that kept plaguing the ship. Everything important still worked, but the minor glitches were becoming annoying. "Maybe we picked up some kind of computer virus at our last port," suggested Crix. "These old systems are vulnerable to all sorts of electronic infections," Vexus. Ty considered this possibility. "Run a full system purge when we reach Proxima Station. We can't afford to have problems during the auction." In their cells, the 12 humans waited patiently. They had accomplished more than they had dared to hope. The intelligence they had gathered would save thousands of lives and destroy one of the galaxy's most evil criminal organizations. But their mission wasn't over yet. At Proxima Station, they would face their greatest challenge. They would have to maintain their cover while documenting the slave markets and identifying key targets for the coming military strike. The Void Harvester continued its journey toward what its crew thought would be another profitable sale. They had no idea that they were actually flying straight into a trap that would destroy everything they had built. The hunters had become the hunted, and they didn't even know it yet. Proxima Station hung in space like a metal cancer, growing larger in the viewports of the Void Harvester as the ship approached. Sarah Chen stared through the small window of her cell and felt her heart grow cold at the sight of it. The station was massive, easily 10 kilometers across, with docking bays that could hold hundreds of ships. Towers and spires jutted out from the central hub, each one housing different parts of the galaxy's largest slave market. Thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds were bought and sold here every day. "Look at that," said Crix, as he stood on the bridge next to Captain Vexthai. "Business is good today. I count over 300 ships docked already." Vexthai smiled with satisfaction. "More buyers means higher prices. Our primitive humans should bring excellent profits in this market." The Void Harvester was guided to a docking bay in the lower levels of the station. As soon as the ship's engines shut down, teams of station workers began connecting power cables and preparing to transfer the cargo. Sarah and her team were loaded onto transport platforms along with dozens of other slaves from different ships. The variety of captured beings was heartbreaking. Tall, graceful creatures with silver skin who might have been poets or artists on their homeworlds. Small furry beings with large eyes who looked like children but were probably adults of their species. Reptilian humanoids whose scales had lost their shine from despair and poor treatment. All of them shared the same look of defeat and hopelessness. All except the 12 humans who kept their expressions carefully neutral, while their eyes recorded everything they saw. The processing center was a nightmare of efficiency. Slaves were sorted by species, physical condition and estimated market value. Medical scanners checked for diseases or defects that might lower their selling price. Psychological evaluators tested their responses to commands and punishments. Sarah found herself in a holding pen with 6 other humans from different ships. They all looked genuinely terrified, which made her job of blending in much easier. She listened to their whispered conversations and learned that some had been captives for months, moving from one slave market to another as their previous owners grew tired of them or needed money. "Don't fight them," whispered an older woman with scars on her arms. "Fighting just makes it worse. Do what they say, and maybe you'll get a master who isn't completely cruel." Sarah wanted to tell her that help was coming, that no one would be a slave much longer, but she couldn't risk exposing her identity. Instead, she nodded and tried to look properly broken and submissive. The processing continued for hours. Slaves were tagged with electronic collars that would track their movements and deliver punishment shocks if they tried to escape. They were photographed from multiple angles for the auction catalogs. Their physical capabilities were tested to determine what kind of work they could perform. When it was Sarah's turn to be tested, she carefully made herself appear weaker than she actually was. She lifted weights that were much lighter than what she could actually handle. She ran at a pace much slower than her real maximum speed. She answered intelligence questions correctly, but not too quickly, making herself seem smart enough to follow complex orders, but not smart enough to cause trouble. The evaluator, a bored-looking alien with purple tentacles instead of arms, made notes on his electronic tablet. Grade A human female. Good strength, adequate intelligence, appears properly submissive. Recommended for domestic service or light industrial work. If only he knew that the properly submissive human in front of him could kill him with her bare hands in 17 different ways. As the testing continued, Sarah's team members were processed through different sections of the facility. This separation was both good and bad for their mission. It allowed them to gather intelligence from multiple areas of the station, but it also made communication more difficult. Marcus ended up in a section with heavy labor slaves, where his military conditioning was noted but attributed to hard farm work. Lisa was placed with technical workers, where her intelligence was valued but not suspected of being anything unusual. David and Tom were kept together in a group designated for security work, their physical fitness making them attractive to buyers who needed guards or enforcers. Each team member continued to gather intelligence while maintaining their cover. The scope of the slave trade was even larger than they had estimated. The station processed over 10,000 slaves every month, with buyers representing criminal organizations, industrial corporations, and private collectors from across the galaxy. But they also discovered something encouraging. The slave trade had enemies. There were abolition movements on several worlds that actively worked to rescue slaves and shut down the markets. There were law enforcement agencies that opposed the trade, but lacked the resources to stop it. There were even some alien governments that considered slavery a crime against all sentient life. Humanity wouldn't be fighting alone when the time came. The revelation came on the second day at the processing center. A Zephyrian security guard named Throx was having problems with his equipment. His shock prod, which was used to control disobedient slaves, wasn't delivering the proper voltage levels. He decided to test it on Marcus Torres, who was standing quietly in line waiting for his daily meal allocation. Throx expected the human to scream and fall down, making it clear to the other slaves what would happen if they caused trouble. Instead, Marcus did something that shouldn't have been possible for a primitive human. When the shock prod touched his skin, Marcus moved. Not the spasmodic jerking of someone being electrocuted, but the controlled, precise movement of someone who had been trained to resist torture. His hand came up and grabbed the shock prod. His other hand struck Throx in exactly the right place to disable him without causing permanent damage. The entire processing center erupted in chaos. Alarms started blaring. Security teams came running from all directions. Other slaves screamed and tried to get away from what they thought was a riot starting. Marcus could have continued fighting. His training would have allowed him to take down dozens of guards before they could stop him, but that would have compromised the entire mission. Instead, he allowed himself to be overwhelmed and subdued, but not before every security camera in the facility had recorded images of a primitive human, displaying combat skills that defied everything the aliens thought they knew about his species' captain. Vexthai was called to the security office immediately. He stared at the playback footage in disbelief. The human he had captured from a simple farming village had moved like a trained warrior. The techniques he had used were not something that could be learned from manual labor or basic self-defense. "This is impossible," Vextai muttered. "My scanners showed no signs of advanced training." His psychological profile was completely normal for a primitive. The station security chief, a massive alien with chitinous armor plating, shook his head grimly. "Your scanners were wrong, or this human is not what he appears to be. Either way, we have a problem." Word of the incident spread quickly through the station's communication networks. Other slave traders began checking their own human captives more carefully. Some of them noticed things they had missed before. Muscle definition that was too perfect for simple farmers. Reaction times that were too fast for primitive minds. Coordination that suggested advanced training, but it was too late for careful observation to help them. The damage was already done. Humanity's secret was exposed. In a communication relay station deep inside Proxima Station, Sarah's quantum entanglement device transmitted an emergency message to Earth Command. Cover blown. Mission compromised. Execute Phase 3 immediately. Admiral Hayes received the message in her command center and immediately activated the largest military operation in human history. "All units. This is command," she announced over the fleet communication network. "Operation Shepherd is now active. Repeat, Operation Shepherd is now active. Show these bastards what happens when they mess with humanity." The revelation was complete. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not the primitive, helpless species they appeared to be. The war for freedom was about to begin. The security office of Proxima Station was in complete chaos. Captain Vextai stood in front of a wall of monitors, each one showing a different human slave who was suddenly acting very differently than expected. On screen 1, the quiet farm woman Sarah was no longer cowering in her cell. Instead, she was standing calmly while electronic restraints that should have been impossible to remove lay broken on the floor around her feet. On screen 2, the simple villager David was speaking rapidly into what looked like a small piece of metal, but was clearly some kind of advanced communication device. On screen 3, the shy girl Lisa had somehow accessed the station's main computer system and was downloading files at a speed that suggested technology far beyond anything primitives should possess. "This is impossible," whispered the station security chief, his chitinous armor clicking as he shifted nervously. "How did we miss this? How did all of us miss this?" Vextai's yellow eyes were wide with a fear he had never felt before. "They're not primitives. They're not simple farmers. What are they?" His question was answered by a voice that came from every speaker in the station at once. It was Sarah Chen, and she was no longer pretending to be a scared villager. "Attention, Proxima Station. This is Commander Sarah Chen of Human Special Operations. You have been holding our people as slaves. That ends now." The word sent a chill through every alien in the facility. Human Special Operations was a name whispered in criminal circles throughout the galaxy. They were legendary for their ability to appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear before anyone could respond. But how could primitive humans have such an organization? Sarah's voice continued. "For 50 years you have hunted our people like animals. You have stolen them from their homes, separated families, and sold them like property. You believed we were helpless because we allowed you to believe it. You were wrong." Throughout the station, the 12 humans began moving with a precision that terrified their captors. Electronic locks that had never been defeated simply opened at their touch. Security systems that had been designed to stop the strongest known species failed to slow them down. Guards who tried to stop them found themselves facing opponents with skills they had never imagined. But the humans weren't trying to escape. They were freeing every slave in the facility while transmitting information about the station's operations. To someone far away, the answer to who they were talking to came from the darkness of space itself. Without any warning, massive ships began appearing around Proxima Station. They emerged from hyperspace with flashes of blue light that lit up the void like lightning. First one, then 10, then 50, then more than anyone could count. The largest ship was a dreadnought that dwarfed even the massive slave station. Its hull was painted with symbols that made every criminal in the system suddenly understand how much trouble they were in. This was the Retribution flagship of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Admiral Sarah Hayes opened a communication channel that reached every ship, every station, and every world in the system. Her voice was calm, but it carried the kind of authority that came from commanding the most powerful military force in human space. This is Admiral Hayes of the Human Colonial Defense Force. I am speaking to all slave traders, buyers, and anyone else involved in the trafficking of sentient beings. Your operations in this system are over. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Resist and face the consequences. The response from Proxima Station was immediate panic. Hundreds of ships tried to undock and flee the system, but they found their escape routes blocked by human warships that seemed to be everywhere at once. Some of the slave traders tried to fight. Their weapons, which had been more than adequate for terrorizing defenseless planets, proved useless against ships that had been designed to fight wars between star systems. Energy beams that should have melted armor plating were absorbed by defensive shields that turned them into harmless light shows. Missiles that should have destroyed entire ships were intercepted by point defense systems that worked too fast for alien eyes to follow. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in minutes. The human fleet had not come to negotiate or to show mercy to slavers. They had come to end the trade once and for all, but this was not just happening at Proxima Station. Throughout the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as human forces struck 17 different locations simultaneously. The intelligence gathered by Sarah's team had allowed them to coordinate the largest anti-slavery operation in galactic history. On the station, Sarah and her team had successfully freed over 3,000 slaves of dozens of different species. The processing centers that had sorted sentient beings like livestock were now empty. The auction halls where families had been torn apart were silent. Captain Vexthai found himself face to face with Marcus Torres in what had once been the station's central command center. The Zephyrian was trembling with a fear he had never experienced before. "You," he whispered. "You were just a simple farmer. I scanned you myself. There was nothing to indicate." Marcus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "That was the point, Captain. We've been watching you for years, learning your methods, understanding your technology, letting you think we were helpless while we prepared for this day." "But why?" Vexthai asked. "Why go through all this deception? Why not just attack us directly?" "Because we needed to know everything," Sarah answered as she entered the command center. She was no longer wearing the simple clothes of a villager. Instead, she wore the black uniform of Human Special Operations, with rank insignia that marked her as one of the most dangerous people in the galaxy. "We needed to know where you kept our people. We needed to know who bought them. We needed to know how your entire network operated. The only way to get that information was from the inside." Around them, the station shuddered as human boarding parties took control of critical systems. The slavers who had once held absolute power over thousands of lives now found themselves prisoners on their own facility. Admiral Hayes's voice came over the communication system again. "All slave traders in this system have been captured or destroyed. All slaves have been freed and will be returned to their home worlds. All records of the slave trade operations have been copied and will be shared with law enforcement agencies throughout the galaxy." But she wasn't finished. To any other slavers who might be listening to this broadcast, understand this. Humanity is no longer content to be your victim. We have ships. We have weapons. We have the will to use them. Touch our people again and we will find you. Underestimate us again and you will not survive the mistake. The message was received across the galaxy within hours. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly found themselves learning about a race that had appeared to be primitive, but had actually been preparing for war. Criminal organizations that had operated with impunity for centuries discovered that they now had enemies who could strike anywhere without warning. On Proxima Station, the cleanup was already beginning. Human medical teams were treating the rescued slaves, preparing them for transport home. Human engineers were studying the station's technology to better understand how the slave trade operated. Human intelligence officers were interrogating captured slavers to identify other criminal operations. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at the station that had once been the center of galactic slave trade. Behind her, Admiral Hayes joined her at the viewport. "Mission accomplished, Commander," the Admiral said. "Your team's intelligence made all of this possible." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained serious. "This is just the beginning, Admiral. We've hurt them badly, but we haven't destroyed them completely. There are still slavers out there, still humans being held captive. Then we'll find them, Admiral Hayes replied firmly. All of them. However long it takes, wherever they're hiding. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity protects its own. As they watched, the last of the rescued slaves was loaded onto transport ships that would take them home. Beings who had given up hope were now free to return to families they thought they would never see again. The slave station that had operated for over a century would be dismantled, and its materials used to build hospitals and schools. The criminal empire that had destroyed so many lives was broken and scattered, and throughout the galaxy a message was spreading that would change everything. Humanity was no longer prey. They had become the predators, and anyone who threatened their people would learn to regret it. The age of human slavery was over. The age of human justice had begun. In the depths of space, other slave traders received the news and tried to understand what had happened. How had primitives become so dangerous? How had simple farmers become special operations soldiers? The answer was simple, though most of them would never understand it. Humanity had never been primitive. They had simply been patient. Now their patience was at an end.